We're going to be talking about the NatWest Distinguished Engineer program, and it's really a collaboration between NatWest Group and FINOS, but perhaps we should introduce ourselves. Chris?
Yep. Hi, so I'm Chris Booth. I work for NatWest. I'm the head of the engineering practice within NatWest, which is really about how we engineer across the organisation, and I'm ultimately the sponsor of the Distinguished Engineer programme. So, as Anthony said, we can talk about how we set it up, how we collaborated with Red Hat, and some of the things we'd like to do with the programme going forward.
Thanks, Chris. And I'm Anthony Kesterton. I'm one of the solution architects working with Red Hat, and my colleague Ali is the other solution architect sitting over there. So between the two of us, we're the sort of technical leads working with NatWest in all different parts of the business. But I guess to start off with, Chris, maybe you could talk a bit about what were the goals of this Distinguished Engineer program?
Sure. So NatWest, is a large bank, and like most, in fact, almost every financial organisation, something in the region, 90% of our interactions are digital with our customers now. So from an engineering perspective, it's critical that it's critical, and that's how we operate, and therefore the skills and the knowledge and the experiences of our engineers are vital to our business. We've got somewhere in the region of 10,000 engineers-ish across the bank, and that's sort of all areas, so software, infrastructure, and so on. And part of my role is that, I suppose, if you like, the kind of career aspirations and development of engineers. And we've done lots of work for the sort of early careers. So we had apprentice programs, we had graduate programs, we have reskiller programs where we take people who are outside of IT and skill them up. We've used people like organisations like Code First Girls, who help a much more diverse group of engineers join the bank. But what was becoming apparent, which is true, I suspect, of quite a lot of large organisations, that the more senior you got as an engineer, you either got stuck somewhere or you had to become a manager, which isn't necessarily the best outcome for an engineer. And actually what we are looking for is how do we recognise the much more senior technical people in the organisation and recognise their experience and skills as a technologist, not just saying, well, you've now reached a level, you better run a team and be in charge of budgets and things, because what we need those skills and that experience and that knowledge because of the issues I said earlier. We've got 90% or so of the organisation of our customers deal with us from an electronic perspective. So we needed to recognise that problem rather than ending up with a sort of, if you like, a ceiling where beyond a level you either got stuck, you left, or you became a manager. So it was quite noticeable, the feedback we were getting from engineers is that there's nowhere to go, I'm stuck. And so that's really where the sort of genesis of the Distinguished Engineer programme came from, is what can we do to recognise those groups of people and give them that growth, if you like, in their career and so on, such that we give them a stretch, but also that they stay in the organisation and we get to keep their knowledge and experience across the organisation. So that's what we were trying to achieve. I guess the challenges for it were for us really was, how do you start? Because we haven't got any. What do you do? So what does one look like? What do they do on a daily basis? How do you work with them? How do you find them? What types of people do you want for them? And those kind of things was really where we were stuck, because we knew we wanted them and we knew that they were sort of broadly what they looked like, but from getting there to having some DEs was really the sort of blank piece of paper. And that's where, I guess, the purpose of this talk really, the collaboration and the experience of using partners was key. And so Distinguished Engineers is not a new thing in the industry. Right? There's lots of organisations who have them. Some people have been running them for a very long time and very experienced in using them. And that's where we reached out to Red Hat and Anthony and his kind of wider network, is how can we utilise their experience of having Distinguished Engineers for, I don't know how long Red Hat have had them, in terms of not just the Ds themselves, but what they look like, how you find them, but more importantly, what the operating model for a Distinguished Engineer is. Because even if we found them, what do we do with them? How do we get the best value from them? And so really, we reached out to Red Hat and say, well, how can you help us talk through not just the mechanics of finding people, but what the operating model of a distinguished engineer might look like, and how do we get the value from all the effort and the skills and so on that we do into putting them, and how does the organisation get the value from them. So that was really the biggest problem, and why we reached out to Red Hat to see how they could help us. So I'll sort of pass it over to Anthony to kind of, I guess, what was in it for Red Hat, because obviously I told you what's in it for us, but I guess this is sort of why Red Hat got involved.
Yeah, so if you look at the why, if you walk into a Red Hat office, then on the wall you'll see our mission. And the first part of it, you see, if you can read it carefully in the background there, it's to be the catalyst in communities. And that's really important to us, because Red Hat, as an open source development model company that builds enterprise software, we totally rely on the communities we work in to actually do things like build software that we will take and we will repackage and we will test and we will support. And that's our business model. So we're very used to collaborating, and we're really excited about working with other groups and other organizations and helping them get better, because that feeds back to us and makes us better as well. And it's one of those things where it's a win-win for everyone. So being a catalyst meant that when we get questions like this from NatWest and other customers to say, can you come and help us with this? We're really keen to get stuck in and help. Now, there's another version of this, and that's a colleague of mine called Dean Clark, and if you're watching, Dean, hi, casually mentioned to some of the NatWest folks that when they said they wanted to start a DE program, he turned around and said, oh yeah, we can help with that, and then went on holiday. So, so I got the call, as being one of the SAs working with NatWest, to say, can you help us organize this? And so, yep, that all went, and you'll hear in a minute how that worked out. And you'll also hear us ask you questions about how perhaps you can get involved as well. But why did we get involved? Because it was the catalyst. B, because Dean asked me to. And also, it was something we wanted to see in the industry, that this idea of a distinguished engineer was more widespread. Perhaps I can ask the question, any of you here distinguished engineers in your organization? Okay, a few of you, okay. And how many people from NatWest? You're a 10 Good, I heard you were coming. The gentleman at the back there, which organisation do you work for?
Morgan Stanley.
Okay, Morgan Stanley. How long has your program been going? Do you know?
I think it's about 5 years.
Okay.
It's relatively new. I think we've had 3 intakes.
Okay. And do you think it more or less aligns with what Chris was saying about trying to make sure you've got a path in a technical career and so on?
Yes, I mean that's certainly an intention, and it succeeds in many ways, and still to be done in the program long term. It's still new. So yes, absolutely.
And the reason I asked you the question, sorry to pick on you, but the reason I asked the question was that our distinguished engineers are very much in the development and engineering side. So there are people like Dan Walsh, is one of the people who got involved in this program. You might know him better as one of the people that helped invent SE Linux. All go boo-hiss, no, it's really good, I promise. And then he's also very involved in Podman. So these are people that are making very strong contributions into open source in general. And they're very outwardly facing people that are bringing innovations into the open source community. And they were quite surprised how different it was, the kind of work that the NatWest DEs do versus the stuff they do. But there was also areas of overlap as well. And so Dan made a really interesting comment. He said, I really enjoyed doing my interview part with the DEs at NatWest, or the proposed DEs, because I learned something about how they work, and the things that they have to worry about and they do is something I don't have to worry about. So it was a two-way street, and we, again, just love that idea of learning from NatWest, NatWest learning from us, and all benefiting from it. So I guess that's the longer version of why do we get involved.
Sure. I guess I'll go on to how we actually did it. So there was sort of, I suppose there were two main parts to this. So the first part was about the sort of operating model, and that was working with Dean had come back from holiday by this point, so this was working with Dean and some of the other colleagues about what it meant to be a DE for them. You know, what they did, not quite what they did on a day-to-day basis, but how they worked, and also how they contributed back into the organisation. So what was their, they have a day job, but what was their DE aspect? What does it mean to be a DE, and how did they structure that work in terms of, did they have a backlog? Did they have did they meet together? Those kind of things, and worked out using that information. How do we then want to do that within NatWest to ensure that actually out of that we get the value for the organisation of having the DEs and the experience? And so that was actually much longer than we thought, I guess, to go through that, to understand that operating model, and then also some of that was the type of people we want for DEs as well. So not just obviously, you know, the technical experience and the knowledge and so on, but also they also needed the sort of people who want to do, I guess, what Anthony and I do, go out and talk. They need to be able to interact with people. They want to be part of that sort of collaboration, because part of the kind of the DE, for us anyway, about the DEs was what we really wanted was them to collaborate across boundaries within the bank to be able to solve problems and work across that. And they needed to be the sort of people who were keen on doing that and got it and got the value. So it was defining all those aspects of the DE program, the operating model, if you like, it's perhaps a grand term for it, but how they're going to work together, and then also the type of people we wanted within that, and then that allowed us to kind of structure some of the actual logistics, I suppose, which was the other problem about, you know, this took quite a lot of logistics to do to manage and so on, because some of the DEs aren't some of the DEs in the US, some are in Europe and so on. So we had to manage all those kind of aspects. And then the other big aspect was the collaboration, was the interviewing. So because we didn't have any DEs, it was quite hard for us to define what the bar might look like and actually what we might be interviewing them as. So yes, we can create a technical test and we can still use our standard HR questions, but that would only tell us what we think. So what we actually did was we asked Red Hat to actually actively interview the candidates as well. So they sat in all the technical interviews. So we had a NatWest person and a Red Hat person doing all the technical interviews, which is where the conversations that Anthony referenced came from about the type of problems. And we actually then set it's a very straightforward kind of technical scenario and asked people to design it and then talk through that scenario with the Red Hat person and the NatWest person. And that gave us, I guess, an independent view of the individuals as well. So, you know, Red Hat were coming with no preconceptions. They didn't really have any idea what the people did for a living. It was just, you know, does this person sound sensible? Do they think they know what they're talking about? Have they come up with some sensible ideas and so on? And so that independent view was really important in helping us shape the people and the right set of skills that we wanted for the cohort, because basically, I said before, we were coming from nothing, so we had no real benchmark to do it. So using that experience helped us build the kind of benchmark aspects for us.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned the word helpful. So my responsibility here was to go and find these DEs to come and talk and do these interviews. So can you imagine, you get a phone call from a random person in your company, in that case me, saying, listen, we've got these NatWest Group, and a lot of people don't recall the name NatWest, especially in the US. Say Royal Bank of Scotland, they go, yes, we know them. But NatWest, it was. And so can you come and do a half-hour interview with these people and to help them NatWest decide whether they're going to be DEs or not? The brilliant thing about Red Hat, which has kept me at Red Hat for 8 years now, and I will stay at Red Hat as long as I can, is people are very, very helpful. And if you want to get collaboration across your organization, you need bunches of helpful people. And so all the people I spoke to, if they could physically attend the interviews, as in join a Zoom call in most cases, they did. They said yes. I was really surprised, because these are busy people. These are people, very senior people in our technical organization at Red Hat, and they all said yes. And then we got them, and then it was the herding cats problem, because we had to make sure that the schedules of the NatWest people doing the interviews, the Red Hat people the DEs and the senior technical people who are actually the Red Hat part of it, and the candidates, and I must take my hat off, as it were, to Kesterton and Patricia Dragon, who then organised all this and kept us honest and sent me schedules and revised schedules, and I would talk to the DEs and the other senior technical people, and we managed to get through a series of interviews in spite of holidays for people, and I think someone gave birth or something, or were parents or something like that. So all these things were interweaved into this quite short period, and we managed to come up with a reasonable schedule that changed virtually every day and got through this lot. And then it was up to NatWest to decide how, whether the people would pass or not, but we were able to give a view and an opinion. And it was really good fun as well, which is the important part, I guess.
Yeah, so I think I just summarise that by saying I think it was that independent aspects that made this so valuable. It wasn't seen as a, Red Hat saying yes or no. They were just very open about this is our view, and then, and based on our experience. And so taking that experience was why the collaboration worked, I think, so well, because they were very, very open about how the model worked. So going ahead, so we now have some distinguished engineers. The process worked. So there's Danny sitting in the back, so he's living proof of it. But I guess there's a number of things that we see based on the experience of us running it. One is it was a extremely non-diverse group of DEs we started with. So basically they all look like me. All the DEs. So one of the things we've had to look at for future cohorts is how do we expand the diversity of that group. So there were two aspects of diversity, one of which was the technical aspects. So initially they were very software engineer focused. They were just essentially very experienced engineers. But actually, for the program to work, you need a wider group of people. You need people from security, you need people from infrastructure, you need people from other aspects to actually be able to tackle the kind of thorny problems that you need. So how do we make that diversity? And the other one is the obvious one. That, they were all male. They were all white. How do we go about fixing that? Despite the fact NatWest has 5,000 or 6,000 engineers in India or so on, we didn't have any distinguished engineers from there. So I think we certainly fixed a technical diversity problem this time round because we've had a second cohort. We haven't fixed the other aspects of diversity at all. So the way we've approached that now is by creating a pipeline of potentially future distinguished engineers who will be mentored by the existing distinguished engineers to line them up hopefully for interviews and preparation for 6 months, a year's time. And we've explicitly made sure that pipeline is much more diverse, with much more gender diverse and also much more ethnic diverse as well. So we can have to hopefully, as time progresses, we end up with a much broader group of distinguished engineers to be able to bring those different views and perspectives into our program. And then the second area is, I guess, the operating model that I talked about at the start is how do we drive that and make sure we get the value as an organisation from having them? What are the problems they tackle? So we've started tackling them. We started our first one talking about the languages, programming languages the bank uses and how does it use them. But I think there's lots more, and particularly now we've got a bigger, wider group of people in that team. There's much more to do it. And then the third area, I guess, is to a certain extent why Anthony and I did this talk is, well, actually, how do we as FINOS potentially collaborate in this space? What is the scope for distinguished engineers in Morgan Stanley or wherever other organisations people represent here for that collaboration? And some of it may be in the operating model, some of it may be in the interview, but also maybe in some of the problems that we collectively, ourselves, Red Hat, etc., own, and how do we take that? So I think we've also got some internal things to fix. Said about the diversity and so on, but equally I think there's an opportunity for us to see where the distinguished engineers in all of our organisations can collaborate and tackle some of the things that exist out there.
I think an important aspect of it, being a distinguished engineer, is your ability to bring on forward people, to identify people in your organisation and say, look, they need nurturing, or that person needs nurturing, to make sure that they're ready to go into that pipeline. And it extends right down. And you can build up a really good virtuous circle where you have people, not necessarily distinguished engineers, maybe they're senior engineers or whatever your role is. Now, how do you, in those roles, look at the people that are perhaps slightly junior, either in age or experience or whatever it is, how do you help them get better? Because by helping them, you bring them up to your level, that improves what you do, because certainly we have strong mentoring programs in Red Hat, and every person I've worked with as a mentor or mentee, I've learned something from them. And that collectively brings forward the organization. And the D is almost the pinnacle of that. And in NatWest, they're the people that everyone looks up to and, oh, you know, I want to be one of you in the future, or whatever it might be. And so the very important part of this DE program is bringing people on. And the other comment I made, and I'll give you the polite version, is Ds can't be horrible people. Okay. They must be approachable. You must feel comfortable as an individual in the organization to go up to them and say, look, I've got this idea, or I need some help for something, and then they use their networks, because they'd be well known in the organization, or even outside the organization, and say, I can help you with that, or that person can help you with that. I know there's other groups, Seth, for example, yourself, inside the bank, doing that kind of work as well. But just if the whole organization does that, it just improves everyone, and you're just raising that bar all the time.
And then I guess this is the sort of almost the Q&A side of this, is that, you know, we'd be keen and open to your comments and thoughts about, you know, obviously the thing we've talked about, but equally, you know, expanding this program wider to the community, and, you know, come and talk to us now or after the session about, you know, how that might work. I'm open to the suggestions of how the mechanics of this actually works, but it seems to me that given the number of problems that exist in the IT industry, that, you know, they're quite complex to solve, and the knowledge and the experience that exists among this kind of group of people, then the opportunity's there for us. Do we create a special group to do this? I don't know. You know, I'm sure that's things we can discuss with FINOS, but the kind of concept of, you know, we all have them, we have this knowledge, you know, what is the scope for collaborating at that sort of distinguished engineer level to do this? And I guess, you know, we're open to that, to those comments and thoughts. So I'm going to open it to the floor if anyone's got any thoughts on that. Yeah.
So a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I was from more understanding this as well.
Sure.
And one of the things that we are trying to correct is that our distinguished engineer population, as you said, technically diverse.
Yeah.
And that's good along many of the dimensions.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts about how you're addressing that?
Yeah, so
Should we repeat the question for the live stream there? So
Sure, yeah.
You're asking how do you improve the diversity of that DE pipeline and the DEs themselves?
Yeah. So what we've done is the way we have tried to approach it is create an explicit distinguished engineer pipeline. So this is a group of people who are in that pipeline, and they are, to a certain extent, we did some positive discrimination, to be honest, in that group. But the deal is, if you're part of that pipeline, you'll be mentored by an existing distinguished engineer, and you know, we'll have some one-to-one sessions and group sessions and coaching and so on. And the aim explicitly is that in maybe it's a year, maybe it's 6 months, that these individuals will be in a position to actively be, you know, considered, interviewed, and so on for a distinguished engineer. So and the way we got that pipeline was that they were partly a people who may have applied for distinguished engineer, but for whatever reason weren't quite, you know, slightly too junior, didn't meet the bar, and so on. And then others potentially have been approached to say, you know, is this something you would be interested in 6 months' time? So we've sort of explicitly created that, and when we set out to define the pipeline, we were quite clear that this pipeline needs to be a diverse pipeline. We can't have the same group. So that's been our approach to addressing it. So I guess if I come back in a year's time, I can tell you whether it's worked or not. But that's the approach we're taking.
I might grab you after.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you pay them more?
Do we pay them more? Danny, you might want to leave the room here. The answer is no, we don't. I mean, to be very frank, we did discuss whether we do that or not. So it's not they stay in their existing role. So we haven't moved them out into a separate role. They're still whatever their day job is, although they have the title or the badge of a distinguished engineer. And at the end, in the end of the year, the pay cycle and so on, then the view will be we'll discuss their distinguished engineers' activities with their line manager and so on, and ensure that's taken into account. But it's not necessarily a sort of it's not a promotion in that sense. It's much more a recognition of that you've reached a certain level of experience and maturity in the organisation.
So maybe do you have thoughts about having a track for people who are more individual contributors or oriented towards tech to climb the ladder?
Yes. So to a certain extent, that's why we set the program up. So the one of the things we're doing in parallel to the program is exactly what you're saying. Is that if you look at the kind of we're a bank, so of course we have a career structure and grades and all that kind of stuff, right? Is how do we create roles that are, if you like, more senior, but are exactly as you say, technical roles that don't necessarily need line management responsibility or whatever, because that they've never existed before. So we're doing that in parallel to say, well, actually, because it's quite feasible you could go that route without becoming a distinguished engineer. I mean, they're not identical. But you're right. That is a parallel thing that we're doing to fix that problem.
Back from UBS, the cohort, I think one thing we found useful is that I know you've got your sort of day-to-day jobs,
sure.
But I think in UBS what they've done is actually you can get 1 day out of the 5 days where you something you're passionate about, where you can spend time. Obviously, you still have to juggle the
Usual story.
What we found is actually quite useful where some Ds might be passionate about certain tracks and technologies, and they form like a little track group basically where they can go and try to solve some of the challenges for the bank. And have you done something like this, or have you explored something like this?
Yes.
It's not a promotion, but like a pay increase, but at least you get a day.
So yes, but we've perhaps not as formally as you said. So the expectation is that they do spend roughly a day a week on DE activities, whatever that would entail. And they're expected to fit that round whatever else they're doing. So we've tried to sort of formalise it a bit on a sort of, so we have a stand-up on a Friday, for example, as a way of doing that to try and formalise it. And I guess when we've started doing actual projects, I suppose, with the DE, so I talked about the languages and about how we approach the choice of programming language and so on. So that has taken exactly that. So we've taken that with a group, and they've set themselves in a subgroup, and they've gone away and done the work. So we have, but I guess it's perhaps not as formal as the way UBS do it, and maybe that's something in time as we get bigger groups of numbers, bigger projects on that we might need to explore to make that a bit more explicit, to say rather than just half an hour here, half an hour there, it's actually every whatever, Tuesday afternoon or whatever you do it. So thanks for that.
We did a workshop with IBM, who've got a long-established distinguished engineer and IBM fellow program. And just to give you an idea, if you're an IBM fellow, you're probably either a Nobel Prize winner or you've invented something fabulous. But they've got DEs as well. And we had a joint meeting with the IBM folks, and one of the things they said is you must give the DEs time to do stuff.
Yeah.
You've got to give them that time. It can't be just yet another thing on their plate, otherwise it doesn't succeed. And I had an interesting conversation with someone earlier this week that said, why don't we apply the same idea, not just to the DEs, but to everyone? And maybe not a day a week, but some time to go off and do a project. And the payback of that, from this lady's experience, was so much more than the time they lost by giving that day or half day or whatever it was. So don't just think about this from a DE perspective. What about if your whole technical organisation had some time allocated to do something different? Something to perhaps think about.
Yeah, you kind of made reference to it in some of your other answers as well. But I guess DE for you, is there like a cut-off point, an introductory point where you say you're now valid for this, and more wondering how you guys make sure there's a feeling of momentum in the organisation, so that if you are on that track, you feel like every 2, 3, 5, whatever it is, there is progression towards
because you've been there 10 years, by
Yeah,
definition you
yeah.
become a DE or something like that.
So I'm obviously not going to.
No, but that sort of thing.
But yeah, so it feels like you have that path, right? And it doesn't feel like just what's it? So it feels less static.
Yeah. We talked very briefly about the sort of career progression, and so we have different stages, I guess, through that. So we have something called the Enterprise Engineer Program, where people who sort of, I don't know what the word is, slightly less senior, mid-level. It's hard to do exactly. But, that's a program that people can attend, and it's a whole year, and it runs every year, and so on. So there are sort of I guess stages, if you like, to do that, and we've been quite explicit about that. For the DEs, there are certain career levels you need to be before you've done that, and and then the EEP is not just because you've done it doesn't mean you become an DE, but it's sort of one of the stages we'd expect people to have been through to do that level. So we tried to do it. I'm sure there's more we could do to make it more explicit, but we've tried to approach it that way.
One thing we do for the promotion levels at Red Hat, and that is promotion, is you're expected to be doing stuff at that level to get promoted to it. So it's up to you to actually do more work in the community or whatever it might be. And that's quite a useful way of, so it's not something you get you don't get to it, you're doing it, you're now recognized for it. It may be one way of thinking about it.
There was another question. Yeah, fine.
How large are your cohorts, and do you have like an ideal percentage of the engineering population in mind? Or?
Yeah, so the initial cohort was only 6 actually, sorry, and then so it was probably too small, essentially. But I think that was a factor of the fact it was new. It was we'd never done it before, and so on. So we've now had a second cohort, and we're at 12, I think, ish, something like that. So. Do we have an ideal number? No, I don't think we do. I think that's deliberate. I don't think we want to say we only ever going to have 15, and that's it, and that's no more. But I don't. We've sort of probably 20, 25-ish, something like that. Partly because I don't. It's designed to be aspirational and special. I don't want to 300 or something, because then it's kind of, or just because you've done 10 years service, you get the badge. It's designed to be aspirational. So probably make something like that, 20, 25, because it's got to be enough that they can do stuff. You don't want so few that there's no chance, but you don't want to be so broad that actually it gets a bit devalued. So I don't know, 20, 25, and maybe we'll find that we need to change that, expand that number in time, something like that. Although I do think, back to the question earlier. What we've been quite explicit about, we don't want 25 of the same people. We don't want 25 software engineers. Of that 25, you do need people from infrastructure, from security, from maybe architecture, whatever, so that actually you get that breadth of what you're trying to fix rather than just they're all the same, because then you don't get the breadth of the problem you're going to get.
Yeah, as a follow-up question, because I guess you were talking about diversity point as well. I'm also interested, do you then try to make sure that you've got a number of DEs, because NatWest Group is a massive organisation. Do you also try and make sure you've got DEs across your entire operation, front office, back office?
So that again was one of the other problems we had. So we didn't in the first cohort. So for example, we didn't have anyone from the wealth business, for example. So you don't get their point of view and so on. So and we didn't have anyone from based in Zurich, stuff like that. So in the kind of, I guess our learning from that was we had to be much more kind of direct in saying to these groups, you haven't nominated, this is the benefits and so on and so on. So I guess ideally you'd hope that everybody the right people would appear, but in practice we did actually have to go out and explicitly say to them, there's no one on this list from your area. Are you sure? You're really sure? Kind of thing, to make sure we fix that kind of problem.
I'm just conscious of time. If anyone is an existing DE in a bank that would like to contribute to an effort to actually try and get more banks and also get more ideas about how you run your DE program, or how NatWest or Red Hat could help others run their DE program, please come and get in touch with us. I'd really appreciate it. I'd also like to thank Chris and the whole NatWest team. It's been great fun working with them. It spawned off tons of ideas and fits in with other stuff we do, like Future Females in Tech, to try and get that cohort coming in from schools and so on. And it's just such a fruitful collaboration. So thank you, Chris. Much appreciated.